Good morning. Hello, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. It's Rod with Pow Group. Welcome back on The Pursuit of Wealth, your home for MJ stocks, crypto assets, and interviews. With me today is Alexandre Voyer, owner of Analyse Cannabis. Alex is no stranger to the show. Alexander, welcome and happy to have you back on the channel. How are things? It's been about 9 months since our last chat. How's everything going?
Things are good. Thanks for having me. I think a lot has happened since the last time we talked, so I'm looking forward to that chat.
No doubt. Yeah, it seems in the industry things move at 100 miles an hour, but
Yeah,
it's been quite a ride over the last couple of years, to say the least, for sure.
exactly. And as you'll see in Quebec, things move sometimes a lot slower, but sometimes a lot faster. So it'll be a good time.
Well, I see we have quite a few people joining us. We've been doing a little bit of a different format and really enjoying these live streams. Everybody tuning in, thanks for joining the stream. Let us know if you enjoy this new format. But like I said, I'm really enjoying it, and I think it's better that we're able to interact with people. But we'll try to make the interview and live stream around about an hour. If anybody does have any questions, just quick heads up. Si vous voulez demander votre question en français, vous pouvez faire ça aussi. Mais if you have any questions, just let us know in the live chat. But we'll go through. There's a few things I'd like to start off. Obviously, the topic of the interview today is going to be on a lot on the SQDC. So there's what I think you said from about 100 new SQDC product drops.
Exactly, 97 to be exact. Yeah.
Okay, so we can touch on that a little bit first, I think. And then, we'll kind of just bring up some of what you're working on and things like that. But looking forward to the interview today. And like I said, I appreciate your time.
Yeah, same here.
So with regards to the new products on the SQDC, can you touch on some of these? So maybe some types of categories. What are the majority of the categories that these new products fall under? Maybe some of the strains, that type of thing?
Yeah, so I'll share my screen if you let me.
Yeah, sure.
So basically, I compile here like just the list of the 97 new products that came out this month. So what happened, to give some sort of a background to people who are outside of Quebec, the SQDC decided that twice a year they were gonna empty the shelves of like the products who had like low velocities and replace them with new products. So it's not the same with like OCS where it's like a huge drop all at the same time. They're kind of doing those like week by week, starting in September, and 6 months later they'll do the same thing over again. What happened behind the scene is they meet with the LPs and they have a list of what they're looking as far as product goes. Edibles, we'll touch on that, but like dry flower, hashish, what say you? And they have criteria as far as like CBD range, THC range, price point, things like that. So if we look, going back to those products that came out, you'll see here that the majority, or I guess the winner of this round of releases so far, has been Rose Science V, which is a white label. So they regroup microbrewers. Like they don't make any products themselves. They're just selling them, or like the middleman selling them to the. If you go down, you can see Canopy. One of the new entries is the C3, Centre Ferme C3.
Okay.
Basically, from what I understand, if I filter on those, they have like three brands: Fleuron, Be Humble, and Chilium. And they're also acting, as far as I can tell, as some sort of white label, because you can see here the en rotation means rotating SKU, rotating strains.
Yep.
So they have one SKU, one product with a strain that will change over time. And I'm guessing what they're either doing is buying bulk or buying from microbrewers who don't have the license to sell. So these guys, I guess, did their homework. They're Quebec, so of course they're a Quebec company. So of course, SQDC will probably promote them more, which is real. Like in Quebec, that's happens often. So they made a good entry, I would say, with 9 new products. You can kind of go down. One of the things that's surprising to me is how EXO right now, there's not that much coming from them. Canopy 12, maybe they're coming in the next few weeks. Like as I said, it's a sporadical release model that SQDC is doing. So this is not the final list, but currently they're not really there, which is surprising since Canopy is there. So if I go back on the categories, which was interesting to me, was here. So I'll go in French and I'll translate. So Fleur Séchée has the most new products, which is dried flower with 51 products. Pre-roll second, hashish third, ready to drink or beverages would be fourth. Meal products, cooking products, which is comes and goes at SQDC, is basically that nano emulsion spray that came out, which you can spray in your drink or food.
Okay.
Concentrate, which would be like pre-roll with if I look at it, what is it? Yeah, so it's a pre-roll with hashish in it, for example, and oil. So this to me kind of talks about the fact that SQDC is following the trend of like the categories with most velocity, or they're keeping with the market share of each category. They're doing kind of respecting that right now. They're not pushing a category in particular. They're kind of staying the course. That's what's been working. Yeah. So other than that, like, yeah, like one other thing I can kind of touch on is how interesting to me that they're promoting like the strains is a lot of rotating SKUs or mix, so multiple strain in one SKU. There's not like, if we look at it, there's 30 products that fall under those, so a third of the products, which to me is a bit surprising. I think with the rotating SKUs, they're trying to promote the micro brewers, which won't have like a big rooms dedicated to one SKU or have that luxury. So they're letting them enter with like a product where they can change the strain very easily. The mélange usually applies to like beverages or like oil, so that makes sense. But yeah, there's not a lot of collisions as far as strain goes. There's a lot of different strains that are available, which is good for the consumer, I think. And I think overall they did a fairly good job, like of finding that out.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of takes away the the trouble of having too many products, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of options, and we've seen that with a lot of the branding too, right? A lot of companies are trying to cut down, from 20 brands to like 5, right?
Exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of restructuration happening, I think. And if you want some sort of insights, there's a little bit more. Like I have this dashboard that I use and that my clients use, where we can kind of see the performance of the new products. So if we look at how it's going, so it's the number of sales in units and when that product actually came out. So I won't count the new products that came out like 3 days ago. I don't think that's fair. But if we look at the recent one, Promenade, which falls under Rose Life Science, and MTL Cannabis, Fleuron again from C3, they're doing a really good job. Yeah, so like overall, you can kind of see that, of course, dried flower and pre-roll will win the number of units, but you can see it that there's like 10 or 12 that kind of are doing much better than the rest of the new releases as well. So that's something to keep in mind. Yeah. What I'm guessing will happen is that SQDC is kind of monitoring those numbers as well.
Yep.
And they might phase out some of the products that are doing not as good over time. Because one of the realities and like of SQDC for people who are not familiar is they're kind of limited by the number of the product that each store can carry. And when you talk about global distribution, a lot of the stores carry the same products. So they're running out of shelf space. That's kind of their limitation. Right. So that's how they're kind of working with phasing out new products, coming back in. And you can see that flow happening twice a year now. Before it used to happen 4 times a year. And now it's actually 2 times a year that's happening. So it's a bit less. It gives a bit more space for the LP to plan. I think that was one of the feedback they got, where LPs were kind of having a hard time. Right. And now it gives that 6-month window to kind of plan your way and have those new, like pitch those new products, right? So
gotcha. Yeah, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And for people that aren't familiar with, I know we did a live stream. I'll just share my screen here real quick. But we did it was about 9 months ago. It's crazy how time flies. But I would have done. We did an introduction to your business, Analyse Cannabis, and Weed Crawler. But for those just real quick that aren't familiar, essentially all of this information is made public by the SQDC, right? So essentially, just pulling that data and then crafting it in a way that is presented, and it's mostly tailored toward like most of your business is for licensed producers, right? The actual producers in the space, right? So
Exactly. So I support right now just above 30 producers.
mhm.
Most of the producers are Quebec producers, of course. There are producers outside of Quebec who are uh, curious about what's happening in Quebec, and they want to see if it would be valuable for them to actually be present in the Quebec sphere.
Mhm.
And where I'm filling that void with Analyse Cannabis is I'm actually able to give them real data, like the sales, the number of units that sold in every store, so every location, which is just about 100 locations now. And for newcomers, it makes it easy for them to figure out, okay, how many units would I sell if I have a similar strain at similar price point, which is something that SQDC does not give away at this present time. So my product or my this Analyse Cannabis and Weed Crawler platform is the main way that producers can main and only way so far as I know that producers can have some sort of leverage or insights about what's going on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I haven't seen anything similar to it, to be completely honest. And just taking a look at the website, if anybody is interested, if there's anybody from, the licensed producer side, obviously they can check out. I'll drop your contact information as well in the chat at the end of this. But essentially, you have like a subscription model, right? Where
Exactly. Yeah, and I tried to keep like one of the things that was really important to me when I started this project is I wanted to that price point to be low enough so that the small LPs could also like
right.
jump in.
Hmm.
And so I didn't want to be too high where it's like, okay, like this is not, we cannot include that in our expenses.
Yeah.
So that's always the model I went with. And well, apparently so far it's worked well because I have over 30 LPs using this. So
30. Wow. Yeah, that was my
yeah,
next question actually. Oh, that's
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Well, I'll definitely drop the website in the chat and your contact information if they want to follow up with you directly. But I thought that
Awesome.
would be good to touch on, just like I said, just to kind of give everybody some background about where this data is coming from, and
Yeah.
a lot of that data can be overwhelming as well. But like you say, through these reports, you do it in a way where they can easily tailor the like different custom reports and things like that, right?
Exactly. So they have like the very basic raw reports I would call, which is are Excel based. They can do their own manipulation of it. They can import it in their BI tools. But I
Mhm.
also just released recently what you just saw for like the dashboard I showed you with the new products and things like that we were exploring. I'm leveraging Snowflake and Tableau to have those dashboards so they easily ingestible for
Okay, cool.
producers.
Yeah, and is this what you're referring to here? The best bang for your buck?
No, so Best Bang is kind of the what felt like the next iteration of the project. Weed Crawler
Right.
was mostly focused in Quebec,
Okay.
and due to, in all honesty, I didn't want it to expand Weed Crawler to the Canadian market because how restrictive the laws are in Quebec with promotion of cannabis and how it's working.
Right.
I built Best Bang for your bud with the assumption that would be easier from a law perspective to keep them separate entities. So if you go on Best Bang, the goal of that is just a really simple way for consumer at least to put your city in and see all the dispensaries that are around you within a 25-kilometer radius. And it's kind of like when you go restaurant shopping, you can click on a store and you'll see the menu at that location with every item. You also see what's in stock, what's low in stock, and what's unavailable. And if you click any of the products, that's the interesting thing to me, at least, and for the retailers, I would think, is you can see from cheapest to most expensive the list and the location where it's available. So for consumers, it helps you save money. But my other thing was for dispensaries, which are really struggling right now. It should allow them to quickly see how they're competing with against other stores in the same area, so they're giving a better experience for the consumers, and they're more in line with what the pricing, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm usually referring to that gas price model where you have like this, you're going to gas to pump gas, you're expecting that all of the gas station in your area will have the same pricing, otherwise they don't make money, like it's not worth it. So
Yeah.
that's the model I went with that idea. So everything you're seeing here is currently free.
Hmm.
You're able to go in there, don't pay anything. You'll as a consumer, you'll be able to view those. What I'm working on for producers is mostly distribution, like just the idea where your products end up, right? Like that's the next phase for the paying model, I would say.
Right. Yeah, and this is a website that retail investors can even utilize, right? Like the consumer, they can go on here, they can check different price points, they can check the location, they can check inventory, things like that. What
Exactly.
stores closest to them?
Exactly.
Pretty cool. Yeah, I've bookmarked this. I'm definitely going to be using this in the future for sure.
Yeah, hopefully you save a few bucks. So that's the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just one more question with regards to the new SQDC product drops. I know you touched on them there,
Yeah.
a couple, but just so it's clear for everybody, you said the most popular is obviously flower and pre-rolls, but what would you say is the most popular product that dropped out of those, say, 100 products?
Yeah, so I would say right now, like the Promenade Berry Cream Puff, and I don't know if it's a secret or not, but if you look at the strains and you're outside of Quebec, I'm
Mm,
pretty sure it's the Pure Sun Farm product. It has
okay.
the same name. So those one, like MTL Cannabis, Strawberry and Mints, very popular also. Fleuron Menu Dessert, which is a rotating product, like strain. They're doing really well. Again, I think the general rule in this, whether it's pre-roll or it's dry flour 3.5 gram always works best. 28 gram is still good, but it will never sell as much, of course. And there's always a, how can I say that? There's always a link between the THC percentage or that fork like of the minimum and the maximum and
Mhm.
the pricing, right? Like if you have a low price and really high THC, of course it will sell much better. So I think that's where the, like, just looking, I don't have the price here, but looking guesstimation wise, these are more in the affordable category. They're not luxury products.
Right.
So obviously they'll sell more. They probably have higher distribution as well, right? Because they're able to pump those, like PSF, I'm assuming, can pump a lot of units,
Yeah.
MTL Cannabis as well. So yeah, just in a nutshell, one of the one that was surprising to me was this new product, the Nueva Plus. It's actually from Cielo Verde. It's a relatively new LP in Quebec that they never had any product come out as, or maybe they did, yeah. But that one was different. If I look at the SQDC website, for it, you'll see it's a bit. They kind of played with it. What was the name again? Let me go back. Nueva Plus. They did something that was interesting and it was kind of bet. So they came in with this new packaging. Like, you know how there's bags and there's like the tuna can for Canara
Hmm.
and there's like the regular plastic.
Yeah.
This one is more like a very hermetic, like it's meant to keep the moisture level, like it's very tight, like there's a seal. So they don't use that classic like a foil seal that you would use in
Okay.
a plastic container. They have no seal. It's basically those three levers that you see on the side and front
Hmm.
that makes it that it's like very tight, and it's meant to be reused, which was interesting to me. Like it's meant to, you can put any cannabis afterwards and it would work like a mason jar
Okay.
type of system. So that was kind of neat. I think their price point is of course above the normal. Like I would say $25 is pretty like the low
Right.
spectrum. They're a bit above, probably due to that packaging,
Packaging,
and they have a good THC range also. They have like, it's fairly decent for
yeah. Hmm.
sativa.
Yep.
So that was a surprising one. It was a hit or miss, and I think they're doing a good job so far. Like I
Mhm.
think they're not they're yeah, they're not doing bad, like for sure. So that was one that was surprising.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And yeah, just when you had the SQDC
Yeah.
website up there,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
they have they must use Shopify. That's Shopify, right? That they use.
No, they actually hired a Quebec company called Orchestra.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so and that's why you're like, okay, so you can, at the beginning you were saying like, how do I get that data, right?
Yeah.
Like so basically they're saying for that product, the Nueva Plus, there's 9 units available in Gatineau, and you can see every single store, right?
Right.
So what I'm doing is I'm automating the capture of those units, and over time I can make deduction of the sales because the units are going down, so there's sales happening, then there's a restock, things like that. So it all looks very simple. Like the concept is simple. There's obviously other logic attached to it,
Yep.
but that's in a nutshell what's happening. But yeah, it's actually a Quebec company, and
Okay.
I don't want to lie, but I think it's a similar company that did the SAQ, so the beverage, like the
Okay.
liquor store.
Yep.
Yeah, so it might be the same company that was meant. I'm not sure. That's the part I'm not sure about.
Well, I've noticed their website is
Yeah.
like super fast, and
Yeah.
the search function is really good too. Whereas, like, I don't want to name any names or anything like that, but there's some other ones that are less than awesome. We'll put it that way.
Exactly, and we can touch on like the later on the new features that they brought out. I think if you looked at it 2 years ago or a year ago, it wasn't as great. I guess it was good but not great.
Yeah.
And they did a few new things that, yeah, definitely help like the consumer experience for at least for them. So I'll give them that. Yeah, for
Okay.
sure.
Yeah, and like we said back 9 months ago in our previous interview and discussion, there's so many growing pains, and a lot of which are kind of not really considered by the average retail investor or consumer, right? And those are one of the things you wouldn't think that in this day and age that kind of the website would be a point of concern. So,
Yeah, exactly.
but, like I said, I've always had a great experience on their website. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And while we're on the subject of the SQDC, can you touch on this photo here? So you actually met with the president, right, at the SQDC?
Yes. So on the left side, Jacques Farcy, and on the right side, Geneviève. I forgot her last name. She won't like me for this, but she's so basically I met they're the two, like the president, and she's in charge of the marketing and distribution as far as I know. So I met with them in early September, so not that long ago, which was a nice experience. I think, in all honesty, it was pretty cool to. So they're the one who invited me. I think they knew my existence since the beginning of this project. They knew I existed. They actually, at first, if we go back 2 years ago, like in 2019 or end of 2019 or 2020, they actually made like a Facebook post about like my Twitter bot, like the first thing when it came out. And I think afterwards the relationship was more like neutral when I came out with like my paying platform, and with the like when you could see like a store and the menu and things like that. So they let me do my thing, but we didn't have any like bridge or anything like that. The communication was not there, and I think they mostly heard through the LPs that were saying, "Man, Alex is doing a great job of compiling the data. Like we're loving his product. Why don't you talk to him?" So they reached out, and I had a hour-long meeting with them. It went really well. I think they're in a phase now where they're more open to like outsiders, and like they're not as close, like being very governmental, where they're like very protective of what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're open. They see the value of what I'm bringing to the consumer and to the producers, so which is kind of neat. And I'd like to say that at the end of the meeting, it was pretty clear that they wanted to build a relationship with with myself and my company, and so that we can move forward with this and work end in end, like with that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I think what you're doing is great, and obviously gaining a lot of traction. So,
Yeah.
doing what you're doing, you're doing a fantastic job.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's always good. And if any of your viewers or yourself have any feedback, whether it's on Best Bang or on Weedcrawler,
Yeah.
I'm always happy to hear. And you can also look, if you look me up on LinkedIn or Reddit or Facebook, I do post every week like the top sellers of
Yep.
the SQDCs. So even though I don't put the unit sales, you still should have a good understanding of what like the fluctuation of those products and things like that. So it's something to keep in mind. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think I actually put a post on here not too long ago of that.
I think so too, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it was on LinkedIn. I'm not sure if it was on Twitter.
Yeah, I think I might have put it on
Yeah.
LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
Okay.
fine. So essentially, you just do like a top what you do is you do a top for each category. So the bestseller in the 3.5
Exactly.
format.
Yeah. So if you
beverages.
look at my screen just for a second, it's basically like that. Like and
There we
it
go.
was meant to be used on your phone. That's why there's that it's that look.
Yeah.
If you open it in your phone, it will be full screen, so you
Right.
can kind of see the online, like just overall online, which are the best sellers, retail, and then you can dive in, right? Like in 3.5 gram of dried flower, which is the more popular, you
Mhm.
can see like in tranches of money, like the $25 and less, like between 25 and 30, etc. 28-gram dried flower, milled flower. So it goes in every category. So week by week, you can kind of see it doesn't, like, one thing I want to make clear to your viewers, it doesn't reflect what's the best product and quality. Sometimes it's just a matter of distribution. Like one of the thing that comes to mind, like people will say like Good Supply Jean-Guy, oh man, it's like it's not the best product. There's much smaller
Yeah.
growers that do better products. But in reality, if you compare it to beers, Coors Light will sell better than a microbrewery,
It's in
like for
it's in
beers, right?
stock all the time, right?
Exactly. So it's
Yeah.
like a bigger distribution, lower price point. That's
Yeah.
what works. And that's why I do the split. Like if you go here, you see lot 420 on the luxury model, they
Mhm.
sell the IS, they have great quality, like their quality of product is great, but their price point is above. So of course they will never compete with Good Supply Jean-Guy. Like it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's a good point. And
Yeah.
you look at like a Canara, for example. They have
Yeah,
such great quality at such great pricing. It's hard for
exactly.
them to keep it on the shelves, right? So
Exactly. Yeah. And that's one thing. There's a bit of a typo here. That's not the treble, it should be cactus. But if we look at the power sherb, that week it's the only one that was in the top.
mhm,
But the only reason why it's not is because the distribution was not there. If I go to, like, if I were to go to a previous week,
mhm,
you would see that gelato mint is usually top one, thing like that. So you can see fluctuation like that that could give investor the story that sometimes it's not because it's not selling only because it's not there, right? Like it's
right,
not because the product is not good anymore. Yeah.
right. Okay, makes sense. And yeah, just for anybody that is unaware, I did do a interview with Nicholas Sosiak, the CFO of Canara, and that was just I did a couple, one almost a year ago as well, and then I just did another one here a few weeks ago. So that was really great. We touched on the new products and things like that. But I highly encourage you to go check that out. That was a really good interview as well. But really impressed with what they're doing. And kind of on that topic, what would you say? What LP would you say you're most surprised by over the last, since 9 months since the last time we talked?
Yeah. Well, I think Canada is a no-brainer, of course. They're the only thing I was worried about them when we talked the last time was distribution. Like they had a hard time keeping up with the demand. I
Mm-hmm.
think they're doing much better with the Valley Field, as far as I can understand. They have more rooms going, and they have a lot of that side under control, I would say. And
Yeah.
they're expand like in the. I'll focus on Quebec. So the quality of the product seems to be constant, which is huge. There's not a lot of fluctuation in quality, like it hasn't dropped or anything, which is great. And they still managed to came out with new products, right? Like that's always a risk. Like if I look at lot 420 or like smaller LPs, it's always a challenge when we have a flagship like product and you're trying to diversify. Like it's like, will the consumer follow? Like, would they be interested with that? I think MTL Cannabis had difficulty with that at one point with the like their one product they had, and then they tried to diversify. So Canara definitely, I think Rose Science V for sure. Like they're doing a great job at just getting the right people under them,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's like bigger LPs like Pure Sun Farm, getting them into Quebec, or smaller microbrewers. They're doing a great job with that. I think the challenge for bigger LPs like Canopy or Exo is trying to find, like, I think they're doing the right job by reducing the offer that they're like of products and
Yep.
focusing on the quality, like trying to standardize the quality, what's going to be like the it goes back to what we said in the previous discussion, but it's worth mentioning again, just being constant of the the quality of the flower. That means the humidity, the size, just the overall like look of the flower, the trim, everything, and also not trying to be all over the place with the strains like too much, so you're like confusing the consumer.
Mhm.
So the fact that they're scaling back, at least in Quebec, I won't talk for the rest because I haven't made that analysis, but in Quebec, it seems that they're scaling back the number of SKUs that they have, and they're focusing on quality, which to me speaks volumes about the goal that they're trying to achieve.
Yep.
Other than that, for the newcomers, like we touched on it, but C3 Farm, I
Mhm.
think it was they were present with Mendo, I think, as with Fleuron, like with that brand,
Right.
with the medical side. But it seems to me like at least they did their homework, and they before entering SQDC, like they did their homework. Same thing for Cielo Verde. They did a good, like the newcomers, at least nowadays, seems to have figured out the very basic, which that's needed to and make a good entry,
Yeah.
which is to me, and for consumer, I think it's very exciting. Finally, there's none of that like weird like variation in quality and like things like that. So it's finally a good. I would say, I'm looking forward to 2023. Like
Yep.
it's looking good consumer wise and investor wise, just for the stability. Finally, there's like some sense of what's happening. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And like you
yeah,
said, they're it's a constantly changing, right? And like doing it at scale, especially, a name like Canara,
exactly.
it's
Yeah.
it's something that
Uh,
we're just
and I
gonna have.
think like if you reflect on the past 2 or 3 years, it's a little bit like the rabbit versus the turtle, right? Like I think the rabbit approach worked at first, but the turtle, the way that Canara and other LPs are doing like smaller increments, it works much better and it's easier. Like, of course, from an investor's perspective, you want like we've all seen it during the pandemic, like to the moon, and everything should go fast and your stock should go like.
Yeah.
But in reality, a smart company should not look at that,
Yeah.
not be distracted by that,
Hmm.
and should focus on slowly scaling, making sure everything
Longevity.
is okay,
Yeah.
and longevity. And if you end up selling the company for huge profit, good for you. But you made the right moves. Yeah, like that's what I'm seeing, and that's what I'm really
Yeah.
liking right now. Yeah,
Well, I mean, even the larger names like Hexo and
yeah,
Tilray, they're even struggling with demand, and
exactly. Yeah,
especially Hexo, because I know they have a lot of products that are innovative and people really want to try them, or they're repeat buyers.
yeah,
And even I've seen it like in the edible space or the beverages space is they're just not there all the time. And when I
yeah,
do go and they have new beverages, they're never the same beverages.
yeah,
And I think a lot of that is, well, they've already said it. It's they can't meet demand. So I know for flour, they said they're looking at to increase their output by 200 or 300%
yeah,
to be able to meet that demand. So if you think of a company like Canara, where they're always sold out all the time, right? So
yeah.
it's if it's a challenge for the big LPs, then it's obviously going to be a challenge for those that are on the craft side, especially with a great price point.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's like there's if you look at the big picture,
Hmm.
there's still growth happening in like whether it's dried flat, like any categories. Like it seems, I think beverages is struggling the most, but if you
Right,
look at others categories like edibles, like all of these other formats, they're still going up. It's not as if they're dropping or stalling. So
right.
from a LP perspective, I think it just speaks volumes to like the opportunities there
Hmm.
is. But again, I think you have to be smart about it. And I think EXO, like I think all the LPs who have struggled, like it's been really painful for them. Let's be honest, for the last like 2 years,
Hmm.
I think they're finally realizing, like, okay, let's focus, let's reflect. Like before just pushing any strains, let's be smart about it. Let's see like what it looks like, and they should now. With the data that they have, whether it's from my platform or any other platform, they should have a good understanding what the consumer is looking for and where they can kind of
Trends
have
and
leverage. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and like I don't know if you've heard anything about the drink limits, but that's something that we haven't seen yet either. But I don't really think it even matters, to be honest with you, because if they can't keep the stock now, um,
Exactly.
it's almost going to be at their disadvantage to increase the drinks from 5 to
Yeah.
48 or whatever it ends up being. But I
Yeah.
think they said that it was expected like around May or June that it was supposed to increase. But
Yeah.
I think a lot of that is probably due to the fact that, we can't even selling them individually, we can't meet demand. So I think it's as it
Yeah.
scales, then I know a lot of people, that was a question that a lot of people have. How come we haven't seen those drink limits increase yet? But
Yeah, and in Quebec, I think that the tough situation they'll have is even though the legislation on a federal level will increase, I'm curious if Quebec will follow suit because they've been like even tougher on restriction, right? Like for beverage, as far as I can tell, is 5 or 10. Like I don't think there's a lot of like it's pretty low, like the
yeah,
quantity. Same thing for like concentrates. I think they're like ashish or things like that. Their 30% limit is a very hard limit. So even if the legislation shift, I think it will take more time to Quebec to kind of react on
yeah.
that shift.
And we
Yeah,
know that the federal government is set to review the MJ
yeah,
Act as well, right? So we could see
yeah.
some positive, not just from the provincial level or the municipal level. It's going to be, I think, more hierarchy level, right? It's going to be at the top level, federal level. So
Exactly.
tons
Yeah,
of
and
just from
there's like I
Quebec.
think it one of the cool thing that we might see is and we've seen it in the last year is the LPs being more imaginative or creative, I guess would be the right word, with going around some of the limitations. So like one of the cool thing that came to my like when I saw that happening, I was like, man, this is a genius move. When Edison came out with the losange instead, like where they could sell 10 milligram losange, like 10 of them, so there's a total of 100 milligram of THC, and not fall under the edible category, but fall under the capsule category.
Mhm.
That was like I was like, man, how come no one thought about this before? Like just circumventing totally that edible, and you can see that some of the producers are doing that with, how you had like what's it called, like those jelly edibles, like that you
Okay,
can
yeah,
just have. They're from what I understand, they're trying to go around the edible. Like if the number of ingredients is lower than a certain amount, it's not an edible anymore, like from the legal perspective. So if they can make some sort of object or thing that has only one ingredient or two ingredients, they can make it go into the concentrate segment and not the edible segment,
right,
and then they can start pumping like all these type of edibles that won't be restricted by that
right.
that limit.
Yeah, that's
So,
smart.
and I think that's it was one I'm kind of stealing your thunder. It was one of your question that you wanted to ask me, and I think that's where we're gonna see some of the shift in this at SQDC, where some of the LPs are trying to pitch those more creative
Mhm.
approach
Yeah,
to go around with, like the
circumvent.
limitation, because the edible limitation in Quebec for people who are not in Quebec or don't go to SQDC is very restrictive in the sense that it needs to be healthy,
Yep,
which there's no like candies or it shouldn't be appealing to children. So
right,
that's the first restriction. It needs to be healthy. That's the second restriction. And the law in Quebec is you're not supposed to promote cannabis. So like there's no way, it shouldn't be like appealing, like very, oh man, I need to eat this, it looks really good, like I want to do it. So how do you work with those limitations? It's very tough. And if you look at the edibles that have came out, not that
yeah.
they're boring, but they're kind of a little bit boring.
Figs
And
and
yeah,
cauliflower.
exactly. So they're not the most appealing, right? Like they're more like a granola, like energy balls or whatever. Like they're very creative. I think like even if the public has been very tough on those edibles,
Yeah,
the LPs, man, I kind of every time I see those things happening, I want to raise my ad because I'm like, this is taking a huge risk because it's not going to sell well. Okay,
yeah,
you're not going to sell as much as your sweet edibles in your other
mhm,
provinces for
yep,
sure. But at the same time, they're paving the way for the consumer to finally have something. Okay, and by doing that, I think before SQDC did not have any numbers on the edibles. If
yeah,
they see that those edibles are not performing
true,
well, then they might consider new approach. They might be more
right,
open to these kind of things that are circumventing like the rules.
yep,
And consumers should realize that. I think that's the only point that made me a bit disappointed with the people who were really reactive to those edibles. To me, they don't realize the way what they're pay like what the producers are doing, what the strategy that they're working towards making things better for the consumer.
Right.
So yeah, definitely, I think we're gonna see some interesting stuff, whether it's like even concentrates, if we're
Right.
talking about shatter or like diamonds or live rosin,
Rosin.
like a yeah. So in Quebec, you're limited by that 30%. There's no way around it. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so even for rosin, it would need to be 30%.
Yep.
But look at what Canara did for hashish. Before, the hashish was just compressed keef and really cheap. Like it didn't look like the real ash that you would buy in high school, right? Like it didn't have that feel or the texture. Canara was smart about that. Let's be limited by the 30% in THC. Let's inject CBD. So that way you have the real flower composite. You don't need to put weird oil in it to mix it to make the texture. You're
Mm-hmm.
getting something that the consumer feels well, it ingests well, like it smokes well. So I'm expecting the same thing for concentrate. So for someone who's looking for high rosin THC wise, I think they'll be disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
But for someone who's looking for like a 30% THC with 60% of CBD, it's still not like it's better than nothing. Like at least
Yeah.
it gives you something to work with.
Yeah.
So so to me that's it kind of, when that happens, I don't know, but
Yeah.
it speaks volume to the shift that happened at SQDC, where before it was a firm no,
Mm-hmm.
and now they're kind of exploring or at least open to it, to
Yeah.
hear the LPs pitch those ideas, which
Yeah.
is great.
Well, I've been a consumer for probably longer than I want to admit, but
Yeah.
if 30% isn't enough to do the trick, you may want to consider taking a little bit of a break.
Exactly. And I think I like to me the way I think the market will shift at the point where, at first with prohibition, people were probably drinking a lot of whiskey, focusing on the strong alcohol, like just they had like that idea.
Mm-hmm.
And look how the beer market grew and it changed, and there's microbrewery, and
Yep.
it's not, we're not talking about 90% beer, like it's maybe 10% of alcohol, and
Yep.
it's still great to enjoy. Like you don't want to get smashed all the time. I don't think that's the goal. And if you require that high of a THC at CBD level, in all honesty, and that's my personal opinion, I think medical might serve a better purpose than recreational,
Mm.
only because you have pain, you have something that you want to, that you need,
You
physically
just
need
solve.
to have that. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you solve with that. And that's always available, even in Quebec. Nothing
Yeah.
stops you from getting medical. So if you just want to have a good time, let's say I want to do this interview with you and just be really chill,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'll take a 90% like THC. I
Yeah.
won't make sense. So
No.
yeah. So there's ways that, like, to kind of play with it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think as consumers, we get passionate about it, and we kind of need to take a step back from, like you said, the recreational mindset and look at like, okay, this is actually helping people with anxiety, with
Yeah.
pain and epilepsy, all these different ailments that it's medicine essentially.
Exactly.
Whereas alcohol, you don't really have any of that same dynamic, right? It's
No.
purely recreational, and I think that's sort of the reason why we're sort of molded in that fashion. Is people think that, oh, it's just like alcohol, it's meant for recreational activities, but yeah, there's so much more to it than just that, right? But
Exactly. Yeah.
no, but don't worry about stealing my thunder though, because our
Okay.
conversation definitely seems to have nice flow and segue into all of my questions. So thanks for touching on all the questions. It makes it easier for me.
No worries. As you
Yeah.
can tell, I like to talk, so that's okay.
Well, that makes two of us. But any idea when, I know we touched on it a few times, any idea when more edibles will be available at the SQDC? I know a lot of consumers are criticizing the edibles, like you said, whether it be figs or cauliflower, obviously, and the energy balls and things like that. They're not, they don't look super sexy and things like that. But do you think that this is something that will improve over time? Like these restrictions that the SQDC is enforcing? Do you think it's more of a permanent thing? I know it has to do with being appealing to children. They don't want it to land in the hands of children, but like, do you see more edibles coming soon, I guess? And do you think they're ever going to allow those more sexy type of products in the edible category?
So I think the in the short term, I would say don't hold your breath. I think for the next 6 months, you won't see any sexy or new weird edible, as far as I can tell. That's my
Mhm.
understanding. In the next 6 months, like 6 months to a year, I'm expecting some new things to come. I think it's a fair assessment that 6 months to a year should give enough window for the LPs to pitch. So in the next wave, there should be things appealing. What I'm expecting, so like for gummy bears and things like that you would think that are really appealing to children, the way around it, if I was an LP, was to pitch flavors who are not normal to children. So like nothing cherry blast or like these
Mm,
very appealing like slushy type of normal flavors you would see in slush or whatever. Something more maybe like a lavender or like things that are not as appealing but that fall and that are not, the strong is not strong enough that it's like, oh man, this
yeah, like
sucks.
a
But at
ginger
least,
turmeric
yeah,
or
exactly. Yeah, that would be like, that would suck, right? But if
yeah.
it's like very subtle, like mint, let's put mint, like very subtle mint flavor,
Hmm.
then it's not like the really sweet. You don't get the sweet, you get the minty flavor. And I still think they could get away with a gelatine gummy bear. Like as long as it's not a gummy bear, it might be like a square or like
Yeah.
something that has no meaning, right?
Mhm.
That's the goal. I think that's the way I foresee edibles kind of evolving.
Yeah.
Um, it's a matter of the enough LP pitching that same type of ideas and SQDC realizing like, okay, that could work with our model.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Lobbying the government essentially too, right? And then, like you said,
exactly.
to touch on with your even your kind of reports with with using, I'll just bring it up again here, but using weed crawler, they can fetch that data, they can see the trends before they develop, and then they're able
Exactly.
to take that information and then say, okay, these are the patterns that we have, these are the trends that we have, and then the SQDC will be able to see it as well. But I think we need to go beyond that, right? If the SQDC is seeing, okay, these edibles aren't selling, well, that's one thing. But if the LPs have, a look under the hood, so to speak, they can all sort of rally together, lock arms, and lobby the government to try to push this ahead a little bit further. Because as we know, the government doesn't like to move very fast. So if
Yeah.
we get the LPs getting access to this data, then, like I said, they can kind of lock arms and then join forces, and then kind of take a more proactive approach versus a
Yeah.
reactionary approach from, say, the government, right?
That's correct. And one of the thing I've seen, I think that benefits all most if not all DLPs, is there's actually like an association, like the AKIC. So it's an association of like all the producers,
Mhm.
and these that association, and I think EXO is part of it, with Isabel being one of the top members of that association. So it gives them leverage to speak as a group and say like, hey guys, like we're seeing that trend in the other provinces, like they're seeing that, would that work in Quebec, right? Like there's all of these things that's happening, whether it's losange, whether it's like all of these odd things that happen. They can leverage that as a under the same voice. And what's been really interesting for me to follow is how this SQDC is now acknowledging the existence of that group and is tying like building some ties with them to make sure they're on the same level. So definitely something that helps them. I think at first it wasn't like that, or not as much. There
Yeah.
wasn't a lot of members in there, that association,
Mhm.
but right now I'm thinking it will play in their favor to speak on in that one voice, just like you said. Yeah.
Totally. And
Yeah.
moreover, on the topic of regulation, with regards to and again, it also pertains to growth, like how much growth that we still have yet to see, even in Canada alone, because Quebec, correct me if I'm wrong, they still don't allow any kind of vape products, right?
Yes, that's
So
correct.
yeah, so any
Yeah.
progress on that through your conversations with the SQDC?
Yeah.
A long way to go, do you think? Or
Yeah. So my understanding is that they are right before it was a Arno, like they wouldn't even look at it. One thing that stood to me is, I don't know if you remember this, but it's still available in the other provinces. There's a product called os.click by EXO,
yep,
and it's basically like, I think, distillate that you
the
can
Dapper,
just
yeah,
click. Yeah, exactly.
it's cool
It
because you can
was
read
it,
it.
Exactly. It was released in Quebec. I don't know if you know that, but it was.
Was it?
Yeah, but it was pulled from the shelf like a day after. I think the SQDC realized their
Oh,
not mistake, but they realized that it was not according to what they wanted
okay.
to have at that time. So it was quickly removed, which
Hmm.
was interesting.
I
It
didn't know
sold
that.
okay. Yeah, so it sold okay. Like I think it sold okay. I don't think the population was aware that that got dropped. So I cannot be clear on the velocity, but I think there was appetite for it. So going back to your question, is distillate like any concentrate things gonna happen? I think yes, it will happen. I don't think it's a hard no anymore. It's a matter of when will it happen. I
Hmm.
think we're seeing the trend with the infused pre-roll.
Yeah.
Before that did not exist at all in Quebec. Like they didn't want that. Now
Hmm.
they're at least like they're allowing it.
Yep.
Um, just a small like just another thing that speaks to my mind when I speak about the infused pre-roll is the only thing I dislike, whether it's in Quebec and other provinces, is how they classify infused pre-roll into extracts and not into pre-roll. So for a consumer, it's really, I
Yeah.
find it really confusing to look
Mm,
them up. Yeah.
true.
So that's a thing.
Yeah,
But
that's a
yeah, so
gray area,
yeah,
right? How do you
yeah. Like
differentiate
for
that?
me, I look at like especially in Quebec, they cannot promote any of their product.
Hmm.
So a consumer walks into the store, say, "I want a pre-roll." The guy will sell them a pre-roll, not an infused pre-roll. If they
Right.
say I want an infused pre-roll, of course they'll sell it.
Yeah.
But if you look at the numbers, the
Hmm.
infused pre-roll are much lower in velocity because they're higher in price, but
Yep.
they're also hard to find. So going back to that, so there's overture about like they're open about the infused thing. So they're open about putting rosin into the infused, like things like that. There's
Yep.
distillate, things like that, which opens the door to the LP to say, we want like distillate, we want shatter, we want like all of these products, right? And what I think is going to happen, and we touched on that previously, is we're going to see rosin, we're going to see all of these concentrate product, but with the 30% limit on
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And I did a post. There's these hash bats from Good Supply.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed that those were packaged on January 31st. So it had a
Yeah, yeah,
pretty
that's
long
not good. Yeah,
shelf. So
yeah,
I start to wonder how, if it's starting to degrade the potency. But I mean, yeah, from the
yeah,
infused pre-roll, we even got, Redican just dropped the milled flour with infused
yeah.
distillate infused into it. I'll also just scroll down here on my YouTube page. I posted a pretty cool post. Wow, I guess I post a lot. But just taking a look, these ones are the new Readycan Readies Plus, and they're fantastic. But I wanted to touch on that. Do you think that? What are your thoughts on this? I know they look like cigarettes, so SQDC is probably like, no, not happening.
Yeah,
But
so
do you think that's
I
something
can
that could
quick
happen?
tell you an anecdote about that. There's so the cigarette look I think is still a definitive no, unfortunately.
Hmm.
Only because again, the appeal of it, the look of it, like I don't think they're a big fan of that,
Hmm.
which is not unfortunate for Redican and Exo and all the other players that use that format. Um, one of the things that I heard that I found disappointing was, how in Ontario you have mix and match pre-roll packages. So you have like a craft selection, like of a different thing, and they label the tip with the strain or like every, so you can know which is which, right? Apparently in Quebec they're not really keen on labeling the tip of the pre-roll. So I think the LPs are struggling with a way of having mix and match type of pre-roll packaging with that. So to me, that kind of speaks to the stance of XQDC right now. I think they're really strict on how they see a pre-roll, what the pre-roll should look like. Um, so I wouldn't hold my breath for the Redican. Like that would be the unfortunate answer. I wouldn't hold my breath on that to come to Quebec. Yeah. I think you're muted. Yeah. Oh, you're muted. I think. Yeah.
Oh, my bad. Yeah, I think I knew the answer to that. I had a drink of water. I'm still getting over this
Yeah. No
flu.
worries.
Doing pretty good. But yeah, no, I thought I knew the answer to that, but I had to ask it anyways.
Yeah.
Also, a
Yeah.
lot of other people in the community were curious about it, but
Yeah.
yeah, we'll go through things a little bit quicker here. So, in terms of market share for LPs, what notable shifts have you noticed in that regard in Quebec?
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
What sort of notable changes have you noticed in terms of market share for companies in Quebec
Yes.
over
Oh
since?
yeah. There's a huge. So I can share my screen to give your viewers more insight. Let me share again. Just a second.
Yep. Yeah, I don't see it.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah. So you should see that. So if I look at market share, it's interesting to me. Let's go. Yeah. So if we go by quarter,
Mm-hmm.
EXO was, and that's for all of the format, like any categories really.
Right.
So Afria with Jangi, like Good Supply, they're doing well, but they're going like it's going down. Like that was 39%, they're at 18%. So you
Okay.
can see how it's being spread across multiple LPs now. Like it's not,
Mm-hmm.
they're not as like you can see all the blanks. The blanks mean that LP at that time was not there, like was not
Okay.
present at all. So if we're looking at the recent quarter, recent quarter, like Afria first, EXO, you can see it like they kind of lost a little bit, came back. I think they're losing only because, as I mentioned right now, they haven't released any new products. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's coming, but
Yep.
right now they're kind of losing a little bit on that stance. Canopy, same story. So I think there a lot is happening. Like Canara, they're going up, like they're doing well. I think
Yep.
they're still pretty stable. The Rose, I think they're doing the best. I
Mm-hmm.
think the fact that they brought in PSF, Pure Sun Farm, helps them a lot. In all honesty, that's the one with the like a pretty big spike. Organigram are also doing okay.
Yep.
Tigad, I think they're like, yeah, they're not doing great, but they're doing okay. But as you can see, it's being spread across many more like LPs compared to the very, like if we look 2 years ago, it wasn't as many. So of
Right.
course it's going to be split, but it gives you a decent picture of like what's going on with that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I know a lot of the, like, for example, Hexo, they said that they're working on a lot of new products and things like that.
Yeah.
And with that said, Redican would be under Hexo on that list, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
So follow that.
Yeah. So we should. I know they said that there's quite a few products that they were expecting new product drops and things like that. So should be exciting.
Yeah.
And then likely other LP. There hasn't been a whole lot of activity actually. Now that you mentioned that, like in terms of just overall new products, I saw something today. Tilray was introducing some new craft beer under their Sweetwater brewing. But yeah, it seems like the activity is sort of, there doesn't really seem to be a whole lot going on right now in the MJ space.
I think they're stabilizing what they're offering right now.
Seems like the calm before the storm.
Yeah, and that like the at least from the Quebec perspective, what's interesting to me is there's a lot of products that came in from that already existed in the Canadian space.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about like Cookie, all the PSF product, like things like that are coming in, and if you look at like I'm talking outside of Canada LPs, it's mostly like existing product that they're just bringing in. For Quebec LPs, of course, it's going to be new products because they're probably not available anywhere else right now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it's something that's it seems like the trend like that. EXO and all these other big LPs, they bring existing products. They don't create products for the Quebec segment solely.
Right. Yeah. And I think the big focus is Ontario, right? And then
exactly.
Like even notice that in Western Canada here, I'm in Edmonton, based out of Alberta, but we used to get a lot of the products first, and then like I don't know if you've seen the pricing, some of the things that I post here, but it's insane, right? I'll even bring up just bring up the YouTube page here because this is. You know, if you told me this back in the day, 12 pre-rolls at 0.6 grams each for 30.94 with tax included, that's pretty hard to beat. And that's something I wanted to touch on later on, which we'll touch on here in a moment with regards to that value segment. But we'll try to keep it on track here. I did want to mention on the topic of Hexo, we did have a community question. The name is slipping my mind at the moment. I think it was Matthew who asked, but shout out to Matthew for the question. But he said Hexo has 9 out of 15 SKUs of dry flower, and they're out of stock right now from Hexo. Any ideas why? And the SQDC says Hexo has 15 flower SKUs. So essentially, for our audience as well, just to be clear, 9 out of those 15 are out of stock. Have you noticed any patterns in those products, including
Yes.
flower and beverages or pre-rolls?
Yeah, so there's a lot of products that got removed from the shelves recently, only because, like I said, all the SQDCs are limited shelf space wise. Like they don't have the luxury like the dispensaries do in Ontario to carry any products they choose. They mostly carry the same products, which is different.
To
And
make way for new products, sort of speak.
exactly. So they started to phase out these existing product, and it was I would I would guesstimate. I don't have the real number in front of me, but it was over 100 products in all the categories that got like total that got removed from the shelves. So by doing that, I think EXO being the most present, like they have the most queues, it makes sense to me that 9 out of these 15 SKUs are starting to be phased out or unavailable.
Right.
Will they be completely disabled? That's the thing that's a bit unclear to me right now. Because SQDC usually, when they don't carry your product at all, they will disable it where it doesn't even show on the website.
Yeah.
But I think they're in that in between phase right now where they phased it out, but they didn't want to say that they're like completely out. So that happened. And I noticed the same thing for their beverages, like their very beverages.
Mhm.
It looks that some of them are sort of phasing out, but it's not as clear as the dry flower and pre-roll. Like dry flower and pre-roll was like very clear cut where it was completely removed. The other categories, it's not as obvious.
Yes.
So to put you
I
in
haven't seen it
perspective,
very well here in
yeah,
Canada either.
yeah, and one of the things that like I have behind the scene, and that's why I can tell you those things, is I have a trigger in my data that tells me when something is removed. Because if there was like 100 units available, and some like in Elmer or Gatineau, and suddenly there's 0 units 15 minutes later, they didn't sell 100 units, so I can tell you that it's being removed from the shelves. And one thing that I do have for the, I'll try to pull it up really quickly,
Mhm.
is I do have a section in my website that's called products removed from shelves. And
Okay,
you'll
cool.
see that in September, if you see the number of stores that it got removed, like
Mhm.
that thing. And if I scroll down to EXO, all of these guys, I can tell you the trend, like because 2 stores might be hard to tell if it's a full removal,
Mhm.
but like 56 stores, man, that pre-roll of garlic jelly, I think is out. Like it got phased out. So that's things like that like is happening right now for most of the LVs, where SQDC is kind of phasing out those to make ways for new products. The only thing that I wish for EXO or any LP is I hope they get to replace with as many SKUs. Will it happen? I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to tell.
That remains to be seen. Okay, yeah. Well,
Yeah,
that's great insight.
yeah,
And also, just I know you touched on it a little bit, some of the performers and market share and things like that. But with the crazy inflation that we've been experiencing, the rise of the concerns in recessionary concerns,
yeah.
have you noticed any trends, any change in trends with regards to craft? Like I know, for example, like a Canara has a really good price point, so maybe not so
Yeah,
much with them, but like from an
yeah.
overall craft perspective, how is the rise of craft going essentially, and are we still seeing a major shift in that direction, or is that sort of hindered by the recession that we're gearing up towards here?
It's a great question. Like from what I've seen, the trend is still up. It hasn't stalled.
Hmm.
Is it as dramatic as a up? Probably not. But it's still a segment like that. The only thing that in that category, I'm talking about the $40 and up per 3.5 gram, like a lot 420 or something like that.
Right.
They never have as much quantity, like their volume is lower, so sometimes it's hard to tell like how that trend is going. What I'm seeing was it's still up. It's not stalling or going down because people are lacking cash. I think people are still buying luxury products at that price point. I think some LPs are still making the mistake of releasing products at a way high price. Like I've seen Cookie come out at like $55 per 3.5 gram in Quebec. Man, to me that's a huge miss. I think they're relying on the fact that they're the Cookie brand, but that ship has sailed. Like Cookie has launched like in the rest of Canada months ago.
Right.
There's not that same momentum, and in Quebec, I don't think it doesn't have that same impact that the rest of Canada had with like Ghost Drop and Cookie and all those big legacy names that came in. I don't think I don't know. Maybe I'm mistaking it, but I don't think people care as much. Like they'll look at the price and they'll say like this is way out of my like for it's like the Whistler product that came from Aurora at like $65 per 3.5 gram. I don't know. That's a weird to me. That's a weird way to
I view it
price
the
point.
same way. Yeah.
Yeah. So from like I kind of exclude those from my luxury analysis. Like to me, those are just mistakes.
Yeah.
Like I'll say it that way. Yeah.
That actually made me think of something. So it's something that we in the Power Group private community we talk about this a lot. And Haxo alluded to it before as well, that every sale is now profitable. And they were sort of working on more of a monopoly. Same with the retailers. Retailers are dropping the price, and that enters a nice segue into my next question. But one thing is that Haxo, for example, is charging way too less. They're not charging enough for their products, and I think that has to do. It's not so much on the producer side; it's also on the retailer side, right? So if somebody's a retailer, they might buy it for a cost of a certain percentage, but they might sell it at a loss, or they might sell it where their margins aren't very good. So, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that companies should be upping their price, like for example, like a Hexo, or is it kind of a hard to really gauge because the retailer's also kind of controlling the price as well, right?
It's a tough spot. So I guess that's one of the point where in Quebec we don't have that situation, right? Because the SQDC has the monopoly of choosing or helping to choose the right price point, and they cannot make discounts. So I won't talk about Quebec, but the rest of Canada, what I'm noticing and what's been unfortunate was kind of that race to the bottom. Like what's the less expensive price I can make my product and have that velocity.
Yeah.
And I think that to me, for a consumer, it's great. Of course, the consumer will never complain about the price point being down, and I think that should be the goal. In all honesty, like it should be. But at the end of the day, it should still be realistic. Okay, like we're trying to fight the black market, which is always a goal. So to fight that, you have to have lower price point for certain like flowers or things. But at the same time, I think the retailers, especially the bigger chains who their model currently their work loss to have monopoly of all the retailers around the location so that everyone else closes shop and they have the monopoly. To me, that's a dangerous game for the consumer, for the producer, and the retailer. And I'll explain why. For the consumer, it's great because at first you have that membership that gives you a special discount and you get it really cheap. But what you don't realize is when they're the only player in the field. Let's say you live in a very small town and they're the only player because everyone else closed shop. What's stopping them from raising the price at that point? Because they have the monopoly, and then you'll complain that oh my god they're raising the price, but the only place where I can buy my weed, so I'm kind of stuck with them. So it's a love-hate relationship. And if you look at their business model and the way they're targeting, like they're voicing their thing in the stock market, this is their goal. Don't be fooled by the cheap price. This is the goal that they want to do. It's the Walmart model that I call it. You have a monopoly. The only thing that's different between Walmart and them is that they're blocked by the government entity, which is OCS right now, or BCCS. So they cannot ask OCS, hey man, I have a huge volume, give me a discount so I can sell it cheaper. OCS will not do that. So it's a really weird strategy. I'm curious how it will play out. It might be a very good play or a very bad play. We'll see it. So that's the first thing. So for consumer, I understand. For retailer, I think it's a dangerous game. We'll see how that plays out. For the producer, I think it's a matter of educating the retailer. For Exo, for example, when they came out with their OS line for the 28 gram, saying it was going to be original stash, to say like this is going to be our like cheapest way, like we're being very like cheap, like with the pricing point,
the value segment.
Yes, so it worked, but at some point you got to say, okay, we're at the point where we're stabilizing the output. Like the flower looks really great for original stash. Like everything is looking really good. So we're confident that we can raise the price and still be value, just like Canara will be with $25 for their segment. But we're realizing that we made our homework, things are better, that it should be reflected on the price. And I think that's the tough game or the challenge they have on their side is they already dug that hole where they want it to be cheap. Trying to raise the price with the same brand is going to be a challenge. That's always going to be challenging because the consumer will say, okay, cool, you have nicer flowers, whatever. But at the end of the day, you still raise your price. And do I like that or do I not like that? That's going to be hard. Should they come out with a new brand and phase out original stuff? I don't know. But that's something that's going to be, I think they'll need to do some sort of brainstorming. What's the best approach? Because I'll go in a segment, but in Quebec, it's allowed to raise the price. Like you're allowed to raise the price of your item. It won't be broadcasted. In my platform, I do monitor those fluctuations. And I can tell you that most often than not, if you raise your price, the consumer does not follow. Like if you raise it to, there's like a few bucks, $1 or $2 maybe, but $10, oh man, like you're being rough. Like that's yeah. So it's definitely a challenge on both three sides: consumer, retailer, and producer. Yeah. Oh, I think you're muted still.
Yeah, there was also an article not too long ago from. I can't remember who the publisher was, but essentially it was saying that the only profitable retailers are those that are government owned. And I think that, again, point, it's the retailers, the private retailers, or the non-government retailers that are trying to gain monopoly and taking the Walmart approach. We can look at, say, Value Buds. We can look at Canna Cabana even now, which is owned by High Tide. They're starting to, if you walk outside, it says lowest prices guaranteed. And they're very much on point, in some cases cheaper than Value Buds now. And Value Buds is owned by Nova Cannabis, which is now 60% ownership of SNDL. So, and then, we're probably going to continue to see that, I would think, because, and from another perspective as well, as the mom and pop shops, right? Those individual family run businesses like in Alberta, because everything's privatized here. It's bad for them too, right? Because not only are they having to keep up with, the big conglomerates in the space, now they have to, sacrifice margins in order to be able to compete too, right? So exactly. It's going to be interesting. But yeah,
I think one of the things that I'm hoping, at least with the goal with my platform, Best Bang for Your Bud for the rest of Canada, would be to kind of help those mom and pop shops in a way that right now Value Buds, Canna Cabana, they can do their homework and know everywhere else where what's the price of XYZ shop, right? Mm-hmm. The mom and pop shop, they don't have that luxury. They probably don't have that time. I think one thing that could help them is seeing around them, being very efficient with their pricing without cutting their margins too much. Mm-hmm. But one thing that I want to make clear for the mom and pop shop, I think one of the things that's really important, and I think that they completely missed out, is they also need to do their homework to understand what the consumer wants. I think at first they bought a lot of things that they couldn't get rid, because if you reflect, and that's the thing that makes me a bit sad, is if you look at it 3 years ago, the word in the street was, put any flower, it will sell out just like that. It's like magic. Everyone wants to buy cannabis. Doesn't matter the quality, doesn't matter the price. Buy everything, it will sell out. And I think a lot of people got attracted to that because for an entrepreneur, you're like, man, this is the easiest gig. I'll just sell whatever. I'll be rich. It will work. What they realize is now they're stuck with piles of cannabis that doesn't sell, that the quality sucks, that the consumer doesn't want or is not excited about. And they're still sometimes not making that homework to see, that looking at reviews, looking at what sells, talking to the consumer, what do they want, talking to the producers, having that conversation, what's what's coming up the pipes. And sometimes I feel that's not currently there yet, even after 2 years or 3 years. And to me, man, it's a business. That should be your priority, to know your business and know what you should carry, know what works. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And with regards to, that sustainable model, I mean, obviously it remains to be seen. So that'll be an interesting. It'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. And obviously, as the restrictions change as well, it's going to be more favorable to those non-government run businesses, I think, as well. So I think there's a lot to remain to be seen just from a sheer, we haven't been here before. We haven't seen how it's going to roll out. If other retailers are going to follow suit, drop their prices, or again, with regards to restrictions and laws changing and things like that, the MJ Act, limitations on things, on orders, and the 30-gram limit per purchase. All of these things are really going to evolutionize and help out the retailers in the long run, right? So I think a lot remains to be seen with regards to that for sure.
Yeah, I agree. The one I'm more curious about, the 30 gram, I think is important. The one I'm curious about is the beverage segment with the calculation of the milligram of THC versus the size of the can and all that thing, which makes it very easy to go above the 30 gram limit of Canada. If that gets changed, I'm kind of curious how it will play out for like those 6-packs, or I think there's 4-packs now that are out in the rest of Canada. But I could see someone like me, to be honest, like going there and wanting a 6-pack or a 12-pack because I don't want to go to the store every week, right? So I'm kind of curious how, if that gets changed, how it will affect that segment. Like, I don't think it will go like, but it might help them having some sort of momentum and less flat.
Well, one thing I just thought of that I wanted to share here. I don't know if you've seen this or not, but essentially, I'll just share the screen here. But Curly founder Boris Jordan says that MJ Drinks will be about 50% of the industry, which I definitely don't disagree with. But what are your thoughts on that? Because it wasn't so long ago that people were saying that, it might only account for 1 or 2%. And then I remember like Sebastian St. Louis, the old former co-founder of Hexo and CEO, he said that he thinks it could be anywhere from 4 to 5%, and he got laughed at. And now you got an MSO, Curleaf, Boris Johnson, their CEO, saying that it'll be 50% of the industry. So who do you believe, right?
Yeah. So I guess I'm more of a realistic guy. I would say don't hold your breath for the 50%. I think maybe in our lifetime we'll see it, but like in the next couple of years, I wouldn't bet on that. But I would be more on like that 5%. And then the only thing I can see happening for beverages that would be interesting is more of like the different approaches to beverages. So like, I think the consumer, like entry-level consumer, people who have not smoked cannabis before, like newcomers, it's easier to get them with beverages than vapes, or than like edibles. And beverages are two segments that I really enjoy, because my wife, for example, who never smoked a joint in her life, she can go in and experience the effects without like having that format, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's still appealing. How fast will it grow? It's anyone's guess. I think
I think a lot of it's dependent on the laws and regulations. So I think Vegas is going to have close to like 100 lounges, consumption lounges soon. And then, you factor in like events and concerts and restaurants and things like that. Exactly. So I think what he means is by 50% of the industry, maybe you interpret this differently, but I think he means like in terms of sales, like maybe in terms of dollars sold, maybe he thinks it's going to be something similar to alcohol. But
like the only part for me that's a bit tough to tell with Canada is it seems the legislation, like the change to that legislation, is already like taking a while, like before they're like already revisiting. So let's say they don't make the right call in the next iteration of that legislation. Man, it's gonna be rough. Like it's gonna be like we won't have like hundreds of like event, like being able to offer them at events, being able to offer them like in the smoke shops or whatever. But say in bars, like I could see that in bars. But like if the law doesn't allow you, like you said, I don't think it's not real that it will go that high. So
we're talking about convenience stores as well, right? Having it in a convenience store where like a Couche-Tard or
I'm more like I think logically it might go like with CBD drinks first, in Couche-Tard and things like that. I could see that happening. Given there was an article not long ago by Government of Canada who said like CBD should not be treated like THC. So like at least it kind of opens that door or that opportunity with CBD drinks. I think that would be maybe more realistic with that approach first, and then the iteration to THC where it's more like with the beverages, like with the beers or spirits or what say you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be a possibility for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that when I saw that article, I just fell off my chair. I couldn't believe it. Just thinking back to when people laughed at 3 or 4%, and now you got somebody at his stature saying 50%. That was definitely pretty eye opening. So
yeah.
But yeah, we're coming on the end here. One final question. A question that we had from our community as well. The SQDC only has about 100 stores at the moment in all of Quebec for roughly 8.5 million people. Comparing that to Ontario and Alberta, I think Ontario has like over 1,000 stores. Alberta, I think, has like 500 or 600 stores. And, that by that metric, it's extremely low. Do you think that the SQDC will be focusing more on that and opening more stores to be able to account for? It's like I was in Quebec last summer and the lineups were insane. I mean, obviously we had the pandemic and everything, but I mean, still though, the lineups were absolutely insane. And it kind of deterred me away from even wanting to go in the first place.
Yeah, so it's a good question. So if we compare, like I like to compare Ontario with Quebec. So Ontario is like, it's two opposite, right? In Ontario, I think you have like 1,600 stores right now, like, which is, to me, it's a little bit the total opposite.
It's high.
Yeah. So if you look to it like from the Quebec, like you said, 100 stores, we're kind of all opposite directions. I think Quebec is taking more of a slow and steady approach. They're limited by a few things that like they cannot be close to schools.
Okay.
They have like a few restrictions. So I feel for smaller towns or even like Quebec City, for example, I think they will need to be very like the strategy around it needs to be tweaked. They are going to open new stores for sure. I think they stopped during the pandemic for a while. I think 6 months or something. They didn't open any new stores. So people kind of felt like, oh my God, what's happening? Are they going to open new store? Like before it was, I think every month or so, there would be like a new store. That's going to come back. With my discussion with them and with what I've heard, definitely something that's there's going to be new stores opening up. Is it going to be as many as Ontario? The real answer, I think, is no. Realistically, I don't think there's going to be near as much stores in Ontario. What I'm curious about the Ontario model, because what we just discussed with the monopoly or very aggressive models that's going on in Ontario, I'm kind of curious to see if that number will start going down very abruptly at some point, especially for big towns like Toronto and like where like I was looking, I think in Ottawa, there's like over 100 stores in Ottawa. To me, that I don't think it's a long-term like thing that it would be like that.
A little oversaturated,
Exactly. So I think you need to find like the middle ground. I think Quebec is way under and Ontario is way over, would be my quick answer to that. But definitely they will and they need to open new stores.
And I think BC is right in the middle.
Exactly, yeah. So one of the things that Quebec is very clear in their mandate is they need to get rid of like the legacy, like all the black market things. So they won't have any choice but to open stores in like more of the rural, like smaller cities location. So that's not going to be a choice for them. I think it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. Yeah.
Right. Okay, cool. No, that's great insight. And I know we're pretty much on our cutoff time here, but I'm just taking a look at the comments. So we had Jamlosi. Good morning, everybody. Looking forward to this. So appreciate you joining the stream. And it doesn't seem like we had too many questions, but I think we covered a lot of ground here today. We had some people just comment, Viva la Redican. Redican's doing some pretty great things. I think that it's more Redican now than it is Hexo, actually. If you take a look at their directors and their, the whole business as a whole, it seems like they're pivoting that it's more Redican, more of a Redican business these days.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Like I think Redican worked really well. Like they had some good momentum there.
Yep.
Makes sense to take the guys who made it work and shift them over.
Yep. Mr. Warner, what did you miss?
What I missed?
So, about an hour and a half worth of awesome conversation is what you missed. To sum it up, we talked about the SQDC product drop. So there's about 100 new products on the SQDC. We talked on a variety of different topics from, regulation standpoint to market shares and, popular products and things like that. So if you did join late, better late than never, but thanks for joining the stream. You can always go back and rewatch it later as well. No, that was a lot of fun. So that concludes today's interview. Thanks again for doing this, Alexander. And that very insightful as always. Always a lot of fun. Looking forward to having you back on again in the future when more changes develop.
Yeah, same here. Don't hesitate to send me an invite. I'm always happy to have a chat with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I look forward to speaking with you again. I'll drop your again, you can just go to Google, search this LinkedIn if you want to drop that in there. I'll also drop in the comments the weedcrawler.ca, which again is that subscription product which allows custom reports and things like that, more geared towards licensed producers. So if you are a licensed producer, you can check that out. But essentially, if you're a consumer or a retail investor, you can also check out bestbangforyourbud.com. And then if anybody does want to get in contact with you directly, Alexander, the best is probably just email, right?
Yeah, email or if you go on quebec.weedcrawler.ca, you'll see a Discord link. So I have my Discord channel set up. So feel free to join on there and just shoot your question my way. I'll be more than happy to answer.
Perfect. Yeah, I just posted that in the quebec.weedcrawler.ca URL in the chat as well. And if anybody does have any questions directly for you, it looks like Jan Lucy said you covered all of my questions. Thank you. Yeah, well, generally what I do is I reach out to the community as well prior to these interviews, and not everybody can join the live stream as well to ask the questions. So essentially I compile a list of questions, a lot of which are my own questions, but it's always nice to reach out to the community. And that's great that all your questions were answered. Thanks again so much, Alexander, for your time. As always, it's been a pleasure. Look forward to having you back on again in the future.
Same here. Have a good one.
Salut. Have a great day.
You too.
Everybody. Bye-bye.